It is easier to take something away from someone if they don't understand the value of that thing that they're giving away, I should say. Now, when it comes to our own personal power, our power cannot be taken from us, but rather it has to be surrendered. We have to forego our power in order for it to be taken from us, but often this comes through some form of like subtle coercion where we don't recognize the potency and the mechanism of the power that we have inherently. So we end up giving it away in things that are subtle tricks. They're things that they sneak in and take our power in a way that it's not obvious that our power is being taken. And they're just like very normal things in society. So one thing I want to get into today is the digital archons. Now, archons are another classification of entity that I haven't talked about much, mainly because I want to understand them on a deeper level before I go deep into those. But essentially, these are beings that are like sort of like containers for consciousness. They are trying to keep consciousness from expanding, and they're entities that quite literally feed off of what's called loosh, which is a certain level of like human emotion, typically very dark and heavy and fearsome emotions. And they feed off of this. It's what they get. So what they actually do is they come and try to influence the planet in a way that they're going to be essentially feasting all the time off of these sort of emotions that humans are always putting into things that they don't even realize might be sucking their energy. So I've talked a lot about the fake matrix and how that works, and how essentially within the fake matrix you have polarities and you have the left versus the right in some variation. And when people are going back between these, it often triggers emotions within them because people essentially tie their belief systems to their sense of survival. So it's an ego mechanism, and when the ego holds a belief and the person lacks a certain level of self-awareness, the ego actually treats that contradictory information as like, you're attacking me. And what comes from that? Fight or flight. You get into fear. You get into anger. You start seeing whoever gave you the information as someone that is like the attacker themselves, as if the messenger were the evil one, not the information. So how archons play into this situation is, say you go on social media, and on social media they're saying, oh, the president did this, oh, this is happening about this, and this is happening about this, and this person's saying this, and you get involved. And you get into that frequency and you get into that space and you say, like, I need to argue about this. Like, I need to get involved in this. What you're doing is you're plugging into something. Now, this is what I mean by it's subtle. It's very subtle. You're plugging into something that is not your sense of wholeness. I'm not saying that you can never debate about anything or never have an opinion about anything. I'm saying that a lot of these situations that you encounter where it's like it triggers you in a way and you want to get involved, they're traps. Because these archons work through people. And I'm not talking about just like the average people. That happens too, like the average everyday kind of person that's just a user of the systems. But I'm also talking about the people who created the systems. The people who created the systems are working for beings that it's like, let's design the system in a way that can harvest as much of this loosh as possible. Because then we're going to use this power for whatever the archons use the power for, to actually continue to keep humanity in this box. Because they feed off of us like vampires, like parasites. And when these systems are designed, they want to trigger your energy and they want to get you outside of yourself and get involved with it. Now you're having the back and forth on their platform. You're doing something like this. If you ever go on, if you don't use social media, good for you. But if you go on social media nowadays, especially places like Facebook and things like that, it's just like a war zone all the time. You go in any comment section and people are just arguing and arguing and arguing and fighting with each other and being very mean about it too, because it's their egos that are involved. It's the egos that are like, I have to affirm to myself that I am smarter or stronger or whatever than this other person because they're wrong about this idea. And if I'm wrong about this idea, well, I can't be wrong about this idea because this idea in my ego is tied to my survival. So they design these systems to literally trigger our base instincts, and then all of the energy that is in the higher centers of the body gets siphoned out into the platform. I mean, if you were to look at this on like an astral level, like someone scrolling on their phone and they're looking at all these things, it would be like the energy is just getting sucked right out of your face into the screen. And that's what these digital archons are doing. They're sitting here trying to get you to engage. They're trying to trigger you. They're trying to get you out of your center. Because, my friends, our power is when we're within ourselves, when we're embodied. So the energy flows up. This is the torus field. And when it goes inward and up, we're actually ascending. And we're creating a sort of electromagnetism that is having us rise in frequency, or if not, just maintain the frequency that we're on. It's not about like constant up and constant up. There's a balance aspect to it. But there is also a downward and out. And this doesn't mean that you're fully inverted. So when the torus field is going up, and let's say from the root of the body all the way up through the crown, and it's creating this field, this rotation, that's the energy going all the way up the pathway and then all the way out the top. And then it's cycling properly. But this is actually how, what they call the 7 deadly sins, right? That we have the 7 different chakras, and within each one of them, if we were to perform a certain action which is divisive, we would actually short circuit that torus field. So in other words, instead of it going from the root to the crown, let's say something triggered your solar plexus or something like that. So it's only going to go to the solar plexus and then it's going to go out. So it changes directions, and that means the upper part of the torus field is now the energy's coming down from there and it's coming out. So you're creating a duality. Instead of the torus field being singular, you're now coming up from the bottom and coming down from the top, and it's creating a field around that chakra, and this creates like an orbit. And the way that this works is this is actually how we lose a lot of our energy. And this energy is very important, my friends. So this is one of those things that people give it away because they don't understand its value. They'll let their energy get sucked up in anything, and we're all guilty of it to some extent. This is not about being perfect, but it's about cultivating our awareness as we go through and recognizing how valuable is your energy really. Because if you're giving it away to this or that, to whichever chakra that it actually corresponds with, then what you're doing, the sin is to divide. Because now instead of cycling your energy in a healthy way, in a healthy and productive way, you're giving it away to something, and then you're creating some orbit around yourself, which is it's going to keep you limited to that space, and that's how these archons function. If they keep you limited to this space because you're not going to use all of their energy, they will gladly gobble it up. That's what they're here for. They're here to take that energy and use it for themselves, and they're here to trick you into giving it away, because they can't take it unless you give it away. But like I said, humanity at this stage, they really don't think in terms of energy. They're not really thinking in terms of frequency. They're just thinking whatever happens and however they're reacting to it is the absolute truth. So my friends, we have to take a step back. We have to be more objective about, okay, is this worth my energy? Is this worth my time? What could I be putting my energy into that's actually going to feed a higher consciousness within myself instead of feeding some parasitic entity just because they triggered faculties within my body, right? They triggered faculties within my mind that make me feel like I'm in fight or flight. Now, the reason that we're different than animals is that we are vertical. Our chakras are vertical. So we actually have the opportunity to have the top-down perspective. You can be triggered, but you can choose not to feed into that trigger. You can choose not to identify with it. You don't have to go down from the observer point of view and become the subject and then say, oh, now I'm this and now I'm that. And like I said, this doesn't mean you to not have opinions. You could be triggered from that state and say, okay, I'm aware of what's happening and I'm going to keep it within myself. To keep it whole instead of dividing myself like this thing wants me to do. Because when you divide yourself, when you separate from yourself, what happens to the part of yourself you separated from? It has to go somewhere, right? And this is the thing about this reality. It's not just like empty space. There's all these beings that are like, oh, they separated. I want their energy. I want it. I want it. I mean, have you ever seen videos of like those ocean rigs where the fish hang underneath because they know that the workers are up there, and they'll toss something to, and the fish are like, you know, they go nuts. Like the fish are just like exploding into this food, and it's crazy looking. That's kind of how it looks with these entities, where as soon as, especially for beings, humans, that are doing this regularly, like they're very prone to giving up their energy, they're in a very low state of self-awareness, entities hang around them. Because they're like, oh, this person, yeah, they're not empowered. They're not within themselves. So as soon as they give this up, like, let's go. So they sit and watch. But the people that are like more balanced and more whole and have more self-awareness, the entities don't bother them as much. You know, that's not always the case. But typically the entities, they're like, we can't get a quick meal out of this. It's less likely that we're going to be able to trigger this person, and they're just going to waste their energy trying to talk to you or trying to get into your head with this and that, because they know that they're not going to get you out of your center, and they need you to get out of your center if they're going to get that energy from you. So with that, we need to recognize how much our energy is worth. We need to know just how much it is worth to stay inside, and how little it can be worth to actually externalize ourselves to get whatever it is that the chakras are tempted by. They say the path is narrow, and that's because it's like you're walking through a hallway. And at the end of the hallway, you know, is something fantastic, but there's these doors in this corridor, and each one of them on the side is something that is just, it becomes more and more tempting as you go. Like, wow, what could be through there? What could be through there? And to a point, there's nothing wrong with exploring those realms, but you know, if you're tapped in, you know that if you're connected with the higher self, that what's at the end of the hallway is going to make all of these seem like they're nothing. Like it's not even worth it to go and look at those, because you want that thing that's at the end. That's the path is narrow, my friends, because in the torus field, we're going up the spine. We're going out the top of the head. We're going through the narrow path because that's how we spin the energy properly to ascend and actually be magnetic in our field. And instead of being pulled out of our field, we're now the magnetic force. We're pulling things to us that are in alignment with us, rather than things pulling us out of ourself just because they're hungry and they want to get a bite of your energy. So know how valuable your energy is, my friends. Know how much it pays off to just, you know what, it's not worth it. You know, I don't need to plug into this. It doesn't matter what these people are saying. Sometimes you really just gotta let people do what they're doing. This is a planet of people that are very unaware, and they're very asleep, and there are systems that are outright trying to take advantage of them, but don't be one of those that's falling for that. All right, so with that, my friends, that's all for today. I wish you all well. If this video resonated with you at all, please feel free, like and subscribe. Leave a comment if you have any thoughts about this. I'd love to hear from you. And be whole, my friends. All right, take care. We'll talk soon.